let me introduce this Evolve Longevity series. This is the inaugural event, and so we're looking forward to doing more of these, probably on a quarterly basis. And I want to thank David Furman for being our inaugural guest speaker, who's traveled far and wide and arrived here. I think he is a really wonderful talk and a really sort of elicit a really fun conversation. And Dr. Keith DesRochers, kind enough to volunteer and speak a bit about an overview looking at longevity, as be able to drop in and give us a bit more of a narrow view of particularly around inflammation, as well as a couple other pieces. He always has something new and exciting to talk about. So so let me just start with my intention around doing this series is to really engage us in dialogue, and that we can all read off the internet or off social media. You can hear from me, you hear from other people, but it's really, I think, great to bring a brain trust together of really we're all pretty smart people, interesting people, curious people, and we can really learn from each other. And, there's a lot of medical minds in the room that can help guide some of that, but also best questions again from you guys, which really inspires me to look at these up or figure stuff out. And then you guys experiment on your own about telling me, or sometimes telling me, and then come back and tell me what you worked. So I really want to encourage that. And I feel that in this day and age in particular, there's so much isolation and so much of us are in silos, and create them together and learn from each other, create community and connection. And we all know that the isolation and loneliness actually is one of the leading causes of morbidity. And so if you want to die early, spend a lot of time alone. If you want to actually live a full life that's actually fun and full and long, then hang out. So this is the way to really bring people together here. That's neat. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Keith DesRochers, who came here he traveled far and wide as well. So after his undergraduate at Harvard, he got clocked at doing finance, and he worked for Morgan Stanley doing derivatives and other crazy things in New York and then in Tokyo for 6 years. And then find his way, and so sorry for the finance people in the room, found his soul. So it's dramatic to say. So went to medical school, did his post-residency training, and then did some what we call extensivist care, which is really intensive care for people right when they get out of the hospital and primary care for them. So he's got really very well experience around taking care of super sick people. He's great. And then he worked for Ford. That movie Ford is our tech-enabled venture-backed company that recently closed its doors, but had dozens of locations. And he was part of me about a year prior to that. In the search we were talking a bit earlier before that. So it's great to have Keith with us here, and he's joining the practice, helping me grow the practice. And so we welcomed Connor Pros coming in. So we appreciate that. So without further ado, keep coming up.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Thank you, Brad. So, going to chat a little bit about the concept of biological age today. So age is just a number, and we all know that phrase. We say it and we hear it, and usually when someone's feeling a little down, like ticking some years off the calendar, the words might be meant as encouragement, but they're kind of half-hearted and they don't often land. But the funny thing is, it's actually true. So why do we care so much about age, and why do we let this one number convey so much about us? So for the moment, let's set aside cultural norms about what life should be like at certain ages and what each birthday implies for how we should be living. And let's also acknowledge that spiritually and intellectually, there are profound benefits and joys to be found in aging. But from a purely physiological perspective, increasing age means decreasing function of our bodies, and it signifies the inexorable march through our life cycle. So in medicine, it's the very first fact we recite about a patient because it's shorthand for so much context. So it tells us about risk factors for certain conditions. It guides our evaluation and results for labs. It hones our differential, and it implies what treatments might or might not be a good idea. But it's an imperfect shorthand. So we all know people in their 60s who hobble around like aged retirees on the verge of the nursing home. And we know guys like Brad who jump out of a helicopter, ski down a glacier, and outrun the 30-year-olds. So, due to a combination of genetics, health, and lifestyle factors, some people seem to age in dog years and some age in whale years. And in this era of increasing inequality, there's no doubt the obese, diabetic factory worker will have a lifespan that's decades shorter than the fit, vegan tech executive. So, are there metrics that can give a better picture of our health than age? Well, of course, there are. So, instead of saying someone's 40 years old, I could describe their baseline labs, their VO2 max, the degree of arthritis in their bones, their grip strength, and on and on. But there's something alluring about the all in one number, something intuitive and something that everyone can understand. So let's dive into some tools that enable us to think about biological age, defined roughly as the accumulation of damage we can measure in your body in a way that's more precise than chronological age and just counting days off the calendar. So, ironically, for a topic that's so central to human life, the field of aging research is quite young and poorly funded. So, one of the most widely accepted papers in this field was published in 2013 and updated a few years ago, and it defined 12 hallmarks of aging. So in order to qualify as a hallmark of aging, a quality must meet three criteria. The alteration of the characteristic must be time dependent. There must be the possibility to accelerate aging by accentuating the hallmark. And there must be the opportunity to decelerate or reverse aging by intervening therapeutically. So you can see the full list here. Don't worry, we're not going to go through all these, but I just wanted to highlight a few concepts that we are now using to create biological clocks. So the first type of clock I'm going to mention is actually a very straightforward technique that just uses labs such as like cholesterol and protein analysis and blood sugar to compare an individual to an age-matched normal person. And these clocks have the advantage of using routine lab values, and they're pretty easy to calculate. But the downside is that none of these labs address primary factors in the biology of aging. So we'll put this one aside. The first biological clock was developed in 2013 by Dr. Horvath at UCLA, and it was based on this concept of epigenetics. So as we age, our DNA accumulates small changes that turns genes on and off, known as methylation or epigenetic changes. So Dr. Horvath analyzed these across thousands of people and built an algorithm that essentially calculated your DNA age. So people who have more or less epigenetic change than you would predict have a biological age that's older than their chronological age. So what were the implications of the clock? So researchers found that obesity, smoking, alcohol, unhealthy eating, basically everything bad you can think of, accelerated the clock. And on the other hand, they found that a diet rich in fruits and vegetables and healthy body weight and regular exercise helped to slow methylation or biological aging. So several companies now offer this test. Grim Age is one of them. It's about $400, and you can buy it online. But one problem with these clocks is that so far, there's no definitive evidence that epigenetic changes cause aging. So we know there's correlation, but not causation. And there's also no standardization among these tests and no understanding of the accuracy and precision. So there's a lot of reports of people getting 3 different tests, some of them even from the same company on the same day, and coming up with totally different ages. So that's clearly an issue. So in order for these tests to become more clinically relevant, we need studies to show us the mechanism by which methylation produces aging, and that reversing it will actually improve longevity. So epigenetic changes occur across thousands of genes in all of your cells, but do they all matter? Are some more important? We don't know yet. So another popular method for building biological clocks is using telomeres. So telomeres are repetitive sequences of DNA at the end of your chromosomes, and they act like little protective caps, sort of like the plastic on the end of a shoelace. So as cells divide and age, eventually these caps degrade and get shorter, and then the cell will stop replicating and eventually will die. So many studies in humans have shown that shortened telomeres cause age-related diseases. So we have a higher degree of confidence and evidence here around this than with methylation. And with that established, research is now focused on using enzymes and gene therapies to lengthen the telomeres again and hopefully delay cell aging. We've started to see some early results in mouse studies, but the road from mouse studies to humans is a long and bumpy one, so more work to do there. Inflammation is another interesting characteristic. Dave's going to talk a lot about that in a few minutes, so I'll hold off. But just to point out, this is one of the hallmarks and used to develop clocks. And then finally, we'll turn to a completely different method for analyzing biological age: AI-assisted facial analysis. So this might sound like literally a superficial way for evaluating age, but it turns out there's real science behind the intuition that some people just look older. So earlier this year, a large group at Harvard published about face age, which is a deep learning system for estimating biological age from facial photographs. So they took a group of cancer patients who, as a whole, they found already looked 5 years older than their chronological age. And then in oncology, predicting who's going to be able to handle chemo and these toxic therapies is really important. It's a delicate and imprecise science that these physicians do on their own. So impressively, the researchers showed that using the tool and the help of AI facial analysis, the doctors made better and more accurate predictions using face age than they could on their own, and that this also correlated with known biological markers. So personally, I get really excited when AI is able to extrapolate meaning and quantify a data source for me in a way that I couldn't do just by myself using my own eyes and hands. So it's really not hard to imagine that AI-enabled facial analysis, just like a quick photo, is going to become a standard part of preventive healthcare to monitor for changes in rates of aging and detect hidden stress. Because remember, these patients showed premature facial aging due to their underlying cancer, which suggests that at some point prior to the diagnosis, the AI might have been able to pick up accelerated aging. So to wrap up, there's no doubt that we need biomarkers that can accurately predict lifespan, and any of the approaches I talked about may already be better than simply counting days on the calendar. An important point here, too, is that this isn't just about creating a new novelty test. A robust biological clock also holds the key to unlocking clinical trials in all the longevity space, because without that, we're simply inferring that a treatment is better rather than actually waiting decades for the results. So now I'm going to turn it over to David to talk about some exciting work he's done in this field. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brad. It's really good to be here and present some of the work we've been doing over the past several years. I've been with Stanford for 17 years leading the Thousand Immunomes project, and part of that study really came to fruition in this company, Edifice, that Brad was alluding to, that is basically commercializing this test for systemic chronic inflammation. We measured many thousands of parameters from 1,000 people over the years. We secured over $70 million from NIH, federal funding. And 5 years ago, the CEO of the Buck Institute recruited me at the Buck to lead this AI platform. My background in human immunology and data science was kind of ideal for what they want to put together at the Buck Institute, which is really a focus on extending healthspan, understanding different mechanisms of aging, diagnostics and interventions to extend healthspan, not so much lifespan. So I really want to maybe stop for a moment and discuss this topic of healthspan. Really, healthspan is the period of life in good health, right? Very different from lifespan. And if we can extend healthspan, by default, we're extending lifespan. But we're spending years in good life that otherwise are very terrible diseases will suffer from. Chronic disease. Now, I've seen some figures. People over 65 years old here in the US, on average, are taking over 14 different medications, which really tells you that instead of we're having good quality of life, we're really decreasing that quality of life. And what you see in the left-hand side is the quality adjusted life years without an intervention. In the blue area, it's you're dropping in quality of life, and the wellness adjusted life years are similar trends. And with an intervention, you have that extended. And the same idea was put by Fries in 2008, who said if we could compress morbidity, so in other words, extend health span, we can have a much better life, and also a decrease in the burden of our healthcare system. So we're spending $4 trillion in chronic disease annually. 90% of the healthcare expenditures are going to solve chronic diseases. And we're trying one by one. And how do we do this? We do that by wellness and prevention, diagnostics and therapeutics. That's the entire HBIM business. Okay, and this is actually a very good business. So I'm showing you here ROI of 5x. The annual growth is about 7%, depending on the sector you're looking. All these companies right here have reached out to me. And why would you imagine they are interested in this tiny company, Edifice Health, that we spun out of a Thousand Immunomes company project? Because we have a test for systemic chronic inflammation. It's the first in class test for systemic chronic inflammation. And what do they do? They want to achieve better products, not because they're great people necessarily, but because customers are now much more conscientious. They want to have better products that are less inflammatory. They also have, for example, proxies for inflammatory age and stuff like that. So all these companies, now big corporations, are spending a huge amount of money to repurpose them and rebrand themselves as in the area of wellness and health. And I think because it's really great business, customers will drive this change. I hate the word complex, right? When we say aging is so complex, I think that statement is terrible because it implies we don't understand it very well. And that's actually not true. We spent many, many years understanding those hallmarks of aging that Keith was alluding to, and understanding also that aging is hierarchical. So what you see in this slide is a progression of aging. It starts from molecular changes, goes through cellular changes, more tissue changes, and there are systemic ones. So the hallmarks of aging that Keith was alluding to are mostly molecular and cellular changes that happened with age in different model organisms. We have yet to demonstrate this works in humans at length, but this is a framework to study aging. So I just want to convince you that aging starts with biological changes. Then you see phenotypic changes. Phenotypic is at the level of the tissue or the organ. And then you see functional changes with frailty, disability, and you start seeing diseases that are kicking off, like, for example, cognitive deterioration and so on. So if we want to maintain a healthy organ and a healthy tissue, we need to look at the cell. We need to look at that unit of life. So what I'm showing you here is a cartoon, very simple cartoon, where we have different organs in the body. Think of your brain that is now working to try to understand what I'm saying, right? If you want to have a healthy, functional brain, you need functional neurons, right? If you want to have a functional digestive system, you need to have healthy cells that can carry out these functions, right? And that's true for every single organ. So again, if we want to extend our health span, maintain tissue function, we need to look at the cell. We need to look at how the cell is functioning, measure the cell, and hopefully be able to develop interventions to tackle those changes. My expertise in inflammation really has been a long journey. We published this paper and also what's called the Bible of Systemic Chronic Inflammation in 2019 in Nature Medicine to show all the hallmarks of aging that are accelerated when you have high levels of inflammation. And not surprisingly, you also have increased risk for cardiovascular disease, for Alzheimer's disease, for even depression, major depression disorder. So diseases that once we thought were largely psychological, they have an immune component. we run this clinical trial with 500 major depression disorders. We published in 2014, and 500 healthy controls, and the patients were having inflammation up the roof. So it is psychological, but it comes from the immune system. So we can identify the causes, and we can also prevent those from happening. We can tweak things at the level of the immune system to improve biological aging, to improve all these hallmarks of aging, and to extend health span. So this is not the type of inflammation that that you've seen when you cut your finger. Right? You cut your finger, it gets red and swollen and warm. All those signs of inflammation, that's acute inflammation. It's a response to an infection. This is systemic. It happens in the whole body, in your organs, in your blood. You don't feel it. It's not painful, but it causes these diseases, accumulates damage over and over time. So if it doesn't come from an infection, where does it come from? Probably all of you know already, the environment, how we treat our bodies, the type of food we eat, the type of air we breathe, the quality of the water we drink. So what you see in the left-hand side are all the different triggers of inflammation, from physical to nutritional to stress levels to mental well-being. It was mentioned, Brad, previously, social disconnection. It's a huge risk factor for developing inflammation, for heart disease in the older adults, for depression in younger kids, the quality of the water, smoking, and so on. And how is that transmitted into our inner body? Through our different routes of entry, right? Mouth, lungs, gut, and skin. And then you have these sensory organs. All these things are being affected largely internally to cause major inflammatory processes to be triggered and decrease cellular vitality. Remember, the cell is the quanta of life, and we need to have good functioning cell to have good functioning organs. And so with organ damage, time goes by, and we start decreasing our grip strength, and we start losing our visual acuity. I'm actually refused to wear my glasses for like 7 years now, but I got new ones. I'm trying to use them more and more. I'm 49. And so that starts to go down and decrease. By the way, there's good evidence to show that that's largely inflammatory as well. Psychological well-being. So here we're looking at mostly functional aging, functional decline. So just as a recap of that idea, we have biological aging that's followed by phenotypical aging that is followed by functional decline and disease. And so this is an example of phenotypic versus functional aging. This is work we've done with UCSF, with Joel Kramer there. Say, a scanner of your brain. You can get from the scanner a lot of data, but one of those features is gray matter volume, and it decreases with aging. You can see clearly as a function of aging is going down. You see a beautiful variance here that we're really embracing to understand aging better, and this is what's called phenotypic aging. You can see it. You can observe that from a scan. You can also see different folks, different people here suffering from pre-mild cognitive impairment in yellow and mild cognitive impairment in red, and they're down at the bottom. So this is the perfect example of that transition from phenotypic to functional aging. And we developed a number of different clocks to measure biological aging of the brain. Obviously, it's not here, it's not shown here, much more complicated to show in a slide like this. But just to kind of wrap up that idea that phenotypic aging follows with functional aging, and we can measure these things, we can measure biological aging, as was Keith mentioned before, biological aging clocks. Okay, epigenetic clocks were the first ones described. Actually, the first one is not Horvath, it's Hannum. But almost the same time, and Hannum, nobody pay attention to him, poor guy. And then Horvath is the most famous one. Epigenetic clocks are great at predicting chronological age. Again, it was mentioned before, we don't know much how to tweak these epigenetic marks in the DNA. Very difficult to understand how to intervene. So why do I want to run a test that I cannot act on? It's not ideal. I would like to measure something that's actionable, that is intervenable. So metabolomics clocks, we develop a bunch of those. We really do this for a living. And then not so much interventions, but there's more about non-biology here. Then we have transcriptomic clocks. We have proteomics clocks made out of proteins in the blood. We're now collecting 10,000 proteins in the blood. We have cellular clocks that are based on cell frequencies that are from the immune system. And obviously I'm biased here, but this is the one I prefer the most, the inflammatory clock. And why is that? The accuracy of predicting chronological age is not so great. And, that's natural. It's the immune system. It's responding to things, right? But we know very well what to do. And so I think I have a bias to think that a clock that gives me action abilities is a better clock, period, right? And we're doing much better at predicting mortality as well. And so by leading the 1,000 Immunomes project at Stanford, this is kind of the amount of data we collected, hundreds of thousands of parameters from blood, 1,000 individuals were run in this 17-year study, $70 million, 30 publications plus, and it was still ongoing. Raised another 7 million from NIH to continue the study for the next 3-4 years. So this is 2012. We were already doing AI on the immune system. This was based on proteomics data. We applied a deep neural network to derive an inflammatory clock of aging. And this inflammatory clock was able to correlate the number of diseases. So the idea of cumulative damage was also mentioned before, right? If you're accumulating damage, it's not one disease. It's not cancer, it's not cardiovascular disease, it's not Alzheimer's in isolation. It's actually the cumulative of these things. So if you cure cancer today in the entire population worldwide, you only extend the lifespan of that population by 2 years. And the reason is you develop other diseases, right? You develop Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease. So we're looking at aging, and in particular inflammation, because it really, if you can tackle that one, right? I mentioned $4.1 trillion in annual expenditures. I think we can do much better, much better than that. And so here I'm predicting frailty. Frailty is the loss of muscle mass that sarcopenia that ends up in frail and disability. We can predict this 7 years before it happens. We can predict immune function, so how good the immune system of those individuals is doing in protecting us from different bugs and responding to vaccines. Inflammatory age is correlated with ventricular remodeling, so heart aging. Not a great thing to have. Exceptional longevity. Here we recruited a number of individuals, centenarians that are 100 years and older, from University of Bologna, a collaboration in Italy. And turns out they have 40 years below their calendar age. The inflammatory age was 40 years below their calendar age. Quite surprising. They have a way to cope with inflammation. We just simply don't understand how. But inflammation is definitely a biggie in driving exceptional longevity, and we can predict mortality as well. So we brought that to the marketplace. One of my missions here is really to bring our discoveries to people and create impact. I think if we don't do that, it's really a waste of money from you guys, right? From the government, from your taxes that are paying for our research. And so I don't feel comfortable about putting my paper in a drawer and then end of the story. I want to bring it to the people so that they can get better and improve their health. And so we brought that to the marketplace. We're just launching through clinics, through concierge medicine doctors and physicians. And this is what Brad was alluding to. In this case, you're in a 49th percentile. Remember those growth curves of your kids. You want to be in the upper percentile. Well, here you want to be in the lower percentile. Okay, so this is kind of the patient journey. You discuss with your patient. The physician will discuss and order, receive the kit. You're going to see something like this. This is a Tesla device that we really like. And then there's a lab work that's done in the back end, and then a report gets generated and sent back to the doctor, and he can discuss the results with their patients. So, in my experience, if you diagnose something, you want to have an action. Going back to the actionabilities, to the being intervenable. And so I spent many years trying to bring this idea of multiomics, a lot of different blood parameters, and identify compounds that can reverse these aging phenotypes, right? And so this is the way I did it. Imagine hundreds of thousands of chemical entities that are interacting with different proteins in the blood. And we can basically shuffle, say, your particular inflammatory age profile and create an inflammatory age atlas of compounds that will serve you, that may be very different from those that are serving my inflammatory age. The way we get there is different, right? So this is the inflammatory age modulators. I'm also using that for the next piece I'm going to show you in a moment, but we can map those to foods and food servings. So in this case, I'm showing you lipoxin A4, a very strong anti-inflammatory compound that will target this protein CXCL9, and it can be found in fish, in salmon and herring. So eat your fish. And then the list goes on and on with different compounds and foods and food servings. Please remember this part because it's part of the second company I have, where we're mapping your future aging, not your current inflammation, your future aging with different compounds and foods. We run a clinical trial. So again, I think in the aging space, there's a lot of hype, lots and lots of hype, a lot of money that has been poured into the aging space, and not so many clinical trials. And so we need to be more scientifically sound here. And here we run a clinical trial in 400 people. This is 200 controls and 200 experimental group. And then we were able to decrease inflammatory age by about 2.5 years. And it's a really funny story because you see here, there's a protein called E1. That's a very important protein. It's called eotaxin. And this protein drives cognitive deterioration. Okay? And Big Pharma has been trying to drug this protein for about 10 years. And simply with flavonoids added to your breakfast, you can actually do the job. That was the first 3 weeks we saw already big changes. Yeah. So pretty fast. So it's kind of a super interesting thing, right? On the one hand, we're adding these polyphenols. On the other hand, you see that there beta-glucan. We have 3 grams of beta-glucan. That's helping your microbiome. That's feeding your microbiome and increasing diversity, which is kind of an indirect way to protect ourselves from inflammation. This is a larger trial in 750 people. Half of them are treated, half control. This is completely randomized and double-blinded. We collected over 50,000 features from blood. We did multiomics, the whole enchilada, and also took a bunch of photos from the face. And I'm going to go back to face age. So face age is a really nice paper, right? But how difficult it is to predict that, cancer patient versus healthy controls. So what we're trying to do here is something very similar, but I was inspired by other papers that came before the face age. I call this the healthy selfie program. Okay, so we have these photos of the face of every individual in this study that we paired with biological aging in the body. And so this is the first approximation just to predict age, simply to predict age, right? What you see here. This is the image age or healthy selfie and the age. And my postdoc gave me 39. I was so happy I gave him a bonus immediately. I'm 49 now. But the idea is not just to predict calendar age. I mean, might as well ask you for your ID, right? I want to be able to predict inflammation, organ aging by simply using a photo. That's what we have here. We have federal money, we have sponsored for funds from corporations and so on. So ultimately, what I'm trying to achieve here is to democratize diagnostics for aging for everybody. I want to make this free. I want to make this free and available in the entire population. We can deploy this in anywhere in the world. There's about 5 billion people with smartphones. And so that way, I'm going to feel really good because you can identify the triggers and you can tell people where they are in this journey of aging processes to extend health span. Now I'm going to shift gears a little bit and ask the audience, how many of you strongly believe that aging should be classified as a disease? Raise your hand. Great. This is what I get very, very often. It's great. So the aging community has been pushing the FDA and WHO to classify aging, old age, as a disease. And why is that? Well, if we classify aging as a disease, we have an indication. We can bring diagnostics through FDA approval. We can bring interventions for aging that are recommended